there is an uncomfortable truth that most of us avoid. A lot of things you bought in your life did not make you poor right away, but they quietly took away your future freedom. Every time you say, "It's okay, I deserve it," you are not just spending money. You are selling a piece of your own choices for cheap. No one tells you this because it's not easy to hear. Buying things always feels very real. The pleasure comes immediately. The sense of relief comes immediately. Freedom does not. You do not feel freedom when you refuse to buy something. You only feel it years later, when you realize you are no longer as trapped as before. The problem is, by that time, many options are already gone. In this video, I don't want to ask you how many things you have bought. I want to ask you one question that might slow you down right before you pull out your wallet. The thing you're about to buy, is it making your life more comfortable today or lighter in the future? There's a very real thing that if you don't face it directly, you will never understand why you always feel lacking, even though you have bought so many things in your life. We don't buy things just because we need them. Most of the time, we buy things because we want to feel better right now. And that doesn't make you weak. It just makes you human. Modern life constantly creates pressure. Work pressure, responsibility pressure, pressure to be okay. Very few people are taught how to face that pressure without immediate rewards. And so shopping becomes a very convenient escape. No explanations needed, no waiting required, no relearning anything. You just pay. The sense of relief comes immediately. We get so used to this that we rarely stop to ask, am I buying this because it brings long-term value or because I don't want the discomfort to last any longer? Freedom cannot compete with possessions in the moment. Freedom doesn't feel satisfying. It doesn't make you feel rewarded. It doesn't make others admire you either. When you don't buy something, there is no applause. No one says, "Congratulations on keeping your future options." No one knows except you. And that is exactly the problem. Humans are programmed to respond to what is visible. Freedom is invisible. You don't feel freedom when you refuse to buy an item. You only feel the absence of immediate pleasure. And your brain doesn't like that feeling. Your brain doesn't care about your life 10 years from now. It only cares whether you feel okay right now. So every time you face a spending decision, instinct always says, "Buy it, you deserve it." That sentence sounds very reasonable, very humane, very easy to empathize with. But if you listen more closely, you will realize it rarely asks, what is the cost of this choice? Because that cost doesn't appear immediately. When you buy something, you don't lose freedom right then. You still go to work. You still live normally. Life still feels fine. The real cost comes much later. It comes in the form of choices that are no longer there. You can't take time off when you want. You can't slow down when you need to. You can't say no to things that exhaust you. Not because you bought one wrong thing, but because you bought too many small things without noticing what you were selling away. Freedom isn't taken in a single day. It is worn down little by little. Each time you choose immediate pleasure, instead of preserving your ability to choose, you don't feel a loss. You just feel normal. And that feeling of normal is the most dangerous thing because it doesn't trigger alarms. It doesn't hurt. It just lulls you to sleep. There is something very strange. Many people believe they will buy freedom later. When I earn more, I'll think about that. But reality is the opposite. You don't buy freedom when you have more money. You only have more money. When you have already started buying freedom early, freedom is not a big purchase you make once in your life. It is bought with very small decisions, repeated over and over in moments no one sees. The problem is, those small decisions are always competing with immediate comfort, and immediate comfort always wins. If you are not aware of this game, people like buying things because things promise something very clear. You will feel better now. Freedom promises something very vague. Maybe one day your life will be lighter. Between a clear promise and a vague one, the brain always chooses the clear one. Not because you aren't smart, but because you are responding exactly the way you are programmed to. What's worth noting is that society is very good at making you forget the second option. Everything is designed to make buying easy, fast, thoughtless. Meanwhile, not buying requires you to stay with discomfort for a few minutes. And those few minutes, for many people, are too long. They don't want to think more. They don't want to analyze. They just want the discomfort to disappear. And so they buy, not because they are greedy, but because they are tired. But fatigue, if always solved with spending, creates a very dangerous habit. That habit teaches you that whenever life is uncomfortable, the answer is in your wallet. And if you learn that lesson long enough, it becomes very hard to relearn a different one. The lesson that sometimes buying nothing at all is how you buy more freedom. Not reckless freedom, but freedom with choice. The choice to rest, the choice to change, the choice to say no. Those choices don't come from a large sum of money. They come from not selling them cheaply for short-term pleasures. People who buy freedom are not people who live miserably. They don't reject all joy. They simply ask a different question before spending money. Not, does this make me happy? But, does this bring me closer to freedom or farther away from it? That question doesn't excite you, but it wakes you up. And being awake in a world designed to make you spend without thinking is a huge advantage. If you've never asked this question, it says nothing bad about it. It only says you are living the way most people live. But from the moment you begin to see that every item you buy comes with an invisible cost, you are no longer completely unconscious. You begin to see that freedom doesn't disappear in one decision. It disappears when you don't realize you are trading it away. And right here, a very small shift begins to appear. Not in how much money you have, but in how you look. Every time you reach for your wallet, there is something very paradoxical in the way we look at money. We are willing to spend a lot to buy things that are guaranteed to depreciate, yet we hesitate to sacrifice a little to preserve something that never loses value. Possessions always begin with a very good feeling. New, beautiful. They make you feel like you've taken a step forward in life. But that feeling doesn't last long, not because the item is low quality, but because the nature of possessions is that you get used to them very quickly. On the first day you own it, you notice every detail. On the 10th day, it has become part of the room. On the 100th day, you almost no longer see it at all. The object doesn't disappear, but its emotional value does. Meanwhile, the money you spent on that item does not come back. It has been transformed, not into freedom, but into familiarity. And familiarity never makes your life lighter. On the contrary, it often makes life heavier, because every possession comes with a small responsibility. You have to take care of it. You have to maintain it. You have to upgrade it. You have to replace it when it gets old. There is no item that exists purely as joy. Everything you own demands time and energy from you to take care of it. Very few people calculate these costs. When deciding to buy, they only look at the initial price. They don't look at how many years it will stay in their life and how much energy it will take away. Freedom is different. Freedom doesn't require daily maintenance. It doesn't degrade over time. If something happens, the freedom you have left is the only thing that gives you options. But because freedom has no concrete form, many people don't see it as an asset. They see it as a concept, a luxury, something only for the very rich. And so they unconsciously trade freedom for things they can see. A more complete room, a life that looks more okay, a feeling that they are not behind anyone else. But what few people say out loud is this: every time you add another item to your life, you reduce your flexibility. You have more to manage, more to lose, more to protect. All of that makes change harder. Not because you don't want to change, but because you are carrying too much. Possessions tie you to a specific lifestyle, a specific level of spending, a specific pace of life. And once you get used to that pace, slowing down starts to feel like falling behind. Many people say they can't reduce their spending, not because they don't understand, but because their lives have been built around the things they have bought. Those things are no longer choices. They become requirements. Freedom doesn't work that way. Freedom doesn't force you to live at a fixed level. It gives you the ability to adjust. When you need to push forward, you can speed up. When you need to rest, you can slow down. Possessions don't give you that right. They only give you a sense of ownership in the present and obligations in the future. There is something very strange I have observed. People who own fewer things often have more options, not because they are poor, but because they are not tied to a standard of living that is too high for their ability. They don't need much money to feel okay. And because of that, they don't need to work themselves to exhaustion to maintain that life. Freedom doesn't make you rich immediately, but it makes you light. Light enough to try, light enough to fail, light enough to change. Possessions do the opposite. They make you heavy, heavy with responsibility, heavy with worry, heavy with the fear of loss. And the more you have, the more afraid you are of losing it. That fear makes you more conservative in your decisions, more cautious about change, less willing to try new paths. This is why many people look okay, but feel trapped, not because they lack ability, but because they have framed their lives with the things they bought. Each possession is a small anchor, holding you in place. One anchor is fine, but hundreds of anchors will keep a ship still even when the wind has changed. Freedom doesn't need anchors. It needs space. Space for you to maneuver when life changes. Space for you to choose again when the old path no longer fits. That is why freedom never loses value. Time only makes it more precious. The older you get, the more you understand the value of being able to say no. No to work that drains you. No to a pace of life that suffocates you. No to choices just because you already built them. But to have the right to say no, you have to buy it very early. Not with a large sum of money, but with many small decisions not to buy. Not buying more burdens, not buying more constraints, not buying a higher standard of living that you will have to sustain with tomorrow's effort. People who buy freedom are not people who hate possessions. They simply understand clearly that every item they buy is paid for with a portion of their life's flexibility. And because they understand that, they choose more carefully. Not everything is bought, not all the time, not based on fleeting emotions. They ask a different question. Not, is this beautiful or do I like it? But does this make my life easier to change or harder? That question doesn't make you feel good right away, but it protects you for a long time. If you're listening to this and starting to look back at the things you've bought, don't rush to blame yourself. No one is taught how to calculate the price of freedom. We are only taught how to calculate the price of possessions. But from the moment you begin to see that possessions depreciate while freedom does not, you have begun to buy something very different. Not with money, but with awareness. And that awareness will stay with you in every decision that follows. There is something I learned very early, not from books, but from observing the people around me. People don't fail because they don't try. They fail because they consume the reward too early. This may sound abstract, but if you look at how we spend money, you will see it everywhere. We have a very familiar habit. Finish something, then reward yourself. Tired, reward yourself. Under pressure, reward yourself. The reward is placed immediately after effort, like a natural reflex. And in the short term, this doesn't cause any problems. You feel acknowledged. You feel compensated. You feel motivated to keep going. But the problem isn't the reward itself. The problem is the order. When rewards always come first, the progress that should follow gets shortened. You are no longer building anything. You are only maintaining a feeling. There is a big difference between rewarding effort and using rewards to endure life. Many adults don't realize this boundary. They don't buy things because they're happy. They buy things because they need a reason to keep going. Every time life feels heavy, they tell themselves, at least I deserve this. That sentence is not a lie. It's a form of self-comfort. But if you rely on it for too long, it becomes a very soft trap. A trap doesn't make you fall. A trap makes you stay. Stay in a rhythm of life. You don't want to change. Stay with pressures. You only know how to endure. Rewards that come first make you forget where you are going. You only know that you just finished something hard and you need something to feel better. And modern society is very good at providing those rewards. Fast, beautiful, easy to access. You don't need to think. You just need to spend money. But there is something very important that few people talk about. Real rewards don't come from spending money. They come from building something that stands, building a skill, building a buffer, building the ability to choose. Those things don't give you an immediate rush. They don't give you quick dopamine. They give you a very different feeling. Lightness, light, because you don't need to reward yourself just to keep walking. Light, because you know you are moving forward, even if slowly. But to have that feeling, you must accept a very hard phase. A phase where you work without being rewarded yet. A phase where you keep money while everything around you is inviting you to spend it. And this is where many people turn back, not because they don't understand, but because they can't tolerate the feeling of having the reward taken away. We are used to effort being compensated immediately. When compensation doesn't come, the brain treats it as a danger signal. It says, something is wrong. I'm doing too much. I should reward myself a little. And if you don't recognize this mechanism, it will lead you. You will spend money, not because you need to, but because you need to feel rewarded. The dangerous part is, every time you do this, you are teaching your brain a very specific lesson. If you want to feel okay, spend money. That lesson, if repeated long enough, is very hard to undo. Because whenever life gets difficult, the brain will automatically look for the familiar path. And that path does not lead to freedom. it leads to dependence. Dependence on your current income. Dependence on your current pace of life. Dependence on having to keep doing what you are doing now. Rewards that come first also have a very dangerous side effect. They make you undervalue waiting. Waiting is seen as loss, as deprivation, as self-inflicted suffering, but waiting, when placed correctly, is a strength. Not the strength of rigid discipline, but the strength of the right order. Do first, build first, then enjoy. That order may sound old-fashioned, even outdated, but it is the only thing that has helped humans build things that last. When you reverse the order, you may feel better in the short term, but you will pay in the long term. No one sends you that bill. It doesn't come as a clear number. It comes as fewer choices, less breathing room, less ability to say no. And only then do you realize the rewards you consumed early were never free. They were paid for with time and freedom. There is something very subtle that few people notice. When you always reward yourself to endure, you will never question the very thing that makes you endure. You don't ask, why is my life so heavy? You only ask, what should I reward myself with today? And so the root problem is never touched. You don't build a new lifestyle. You only learn how to live with the old one. Rewards that come first keep you in that loop. They make things just comfortable enough that you don't change, but just uncomfortable enough that you always need the next reward. That's why many people are not poor in money, but poor in freedom. They can buy many things, but they cannot buy the right to stop. Not because they don't want to, but because they consume too many rewards early that should have been saved for later. People who buy freedom are not people who never reward themselves. They just put rewards in the right place. They don't use rewards to cover up long-term exhaustion. They use rewards to mark real milestones. Not, I'm tired today, but I finished building something today. Not, I'm under pressure today, but I moved one step forward today. This difference is very hard to see from the outside, but inside, it creates two very different lives. One life that always needs rewards to continue, and one life that doesn't need many rewards because the path itself is already light. If you're listening to this and starting to realize you've rewarded yourself a bit too much just to endure, don't rush to blame yourself. No one teaches us how to place rewards correctly. We are only taught how to make money and how to spend it. But from the moment you realize that rewards that come first can be a trap, you already have a huge advantage. You begin to ask, what am I rewarding? Am I building or am I enduring? That question doesn't make you feel good right away, but it opens up a very different path. A path where rewards are no longer the thing that keeps you standing still, but the thing waiting for you at the end of the road. There's a sentence I hear everywhere. Regardless of age, regardless of income level, I deserve it. It sounds very reasonable, very humane, very easy to empathize with. After a tiring day, after unnamed pressures, that sentence feels like a hug. And I'm not saying it's wrong. The problem is not the sentence itself. The problem is how we use it. Many people don't buy things because they truly need them. They buy because they need a reason to feel like they haven't lost. Life can be heavy. Work may not turn out as expected. Your efforts may not have produced clear results yet. And in those moments, the feeling of deserving becomes a life buoy. It helps you stay afloat. For a while, But if you cling to it for too long, you will never learn how to swim. The feeling of deserving is rarely used to build the future. It is more often used to justify the present, to justify spending money to cover up exhaustion, to justify maintaining a lifestyle that no longer fits, to justify postponing necessary changes. The sentence, "I deserve it," doesn't ask you a very important question. What do I deserve? Do you deserve a comfortable moment? Or do you deserve a lighter life? When you are young, the feeling of deserving is often tied to pleasure. You accomplish something, you reward yourself. That does no harm. But when you grow up, if the feeling of deserving is still only tied to consumption, it begins to create a serious problem. Because at that point, the reward no longer marks progress. It only marks endurance. You are not rewarding yourself for building something. You are rewarding yourself for surviving another day. And that is a very worrying signal. Your life should not be something you constantly need to reward yourself just to endure. If you need a reward just to keep going, there is a good chance something at the root is not okay. But the feeling of deserving is very clever at keeping you from looking at that root. It says, don't think too much. At least you've done well. Spending a little is fine. And so you continue. Without changing your pace, without asking big questions, without re-examining how you are trading time for money, the feeling of deserving keeps you safe in the present, but it slowly steals the future. Every time you use it to justify spending, you are telling yourself, my present version matters more than my future version. No one says that out loud, but actions say it very clearly. And when that action is repeated long enough, it becomes a belief that life is just like this. If you're tired, you spend. If you're under pressure, you reward yourself. That belief is very hard to undo, because every time you try to change, it asks you back, what about my effort? Don't I deserve to feel comfortable? That question pulls many people back onto the old path, not because they don't understand, but because they don't want to take away the only comfort they currently have. But there is a very hard truth. If the feeling of deserving is the only thing keeping you going, you are living in a structure that will eventually exhaust you, because you are not building strength. You are only learning how to soothe fatigue. And fatigue, when not addressed at the root, will return stronger. There is one question very few people are willing to ask themselves in the moment they reach for their wallet. Do I deserve an item or a better choice in the future? Those two rarely go together. If you use deserving to buy more things, you are usually buying short-term comfort. If you use deserving to hold on to your money, you are buying the right to breathe easier in the future. And that feeling does not come immediately. There is no applause, no quick dopamine. But when it comes, it is very real. It is the feeling that you are no longer being pushed around by impulsive decisions. The feeling that you don't need to reward yourself every time life gets heavy. The feeling that you can tolerate short-term discomfort without panicking. Someone who truly deserves is not someone who spends a lot, but someone who does not sell their future cheaply to buy comfort. This does not mean you should never reward yourself. It only means you ask the right question before you do. You don't ask, am I tired? You ask, is this reward helping me build or just helping me endure? That question is uncomfortable at first. It takes away a familiar excuse, but but it gives you something very rare, the right to choose consciously. And when you have that right, the feeling of deserving is no longer a trap. It becomes a tool to reward real progress, not to hide prolonged exhaustion. If you're listening to this and realizing you've used the words, "I deserve it," many times, don't rush to blame yourself. No one teaches us how to use it correctly. But from the moment you begin to question how you're using it, you've already stepped out of the trap. Not perfectly, not immediately. Just a little more aware each time you reach for your wallet. And sometimes that alone is enough for freedom to begin returning. There is something very interesting that if you observe long enough, you'll realize it has nothing to do with how much money a person has. It has to do with the question they ask themselves right before spending money. People without financial freedom often ask a very familiar question. Can I afford it? That question sounds very reasonable. It's based on the account balance. It's based on purchasing power. But wealthy people, in the true sense of freedom, rarely stop there. They ask a different question. Not a question about ability, but a question about consequence. They don't ask, do I have enough money? They ask, is this decision bringing me closer to freedom or farther from it? The difference between those two questions is very subtle, but it creates two completely different lives. When you only ask, can I afford it? You are viewing money as a limitation. When you ask, where is this taking me? You are viewing money as a directional tool. Wealthy people don't see money as something to relieve emotions. They see it as a vote. Every time you spend money, it's a vote for the kind of life you are building. And when you see money that way, you can no longer spend unconsciously. You begin to see that every small decision has a voice. A vote for convenience today, or a vote for flexibility tomorrow. What's interesting is, wealthy people don't hate spending money at all. They buy things. They enjoy themselves. They enjoy life. But they spend money at a different pace, not rushed, not pulled by emotion, because they understand very clearly one thing that many people overlook. Spending money is the fastest way to lock your own future. If you don't control it, wealthy people don't need to ask whether they deserve something. They ask, does this help me escape having to earn money with my labor forever? This isn't a question with the right answer for everything, but it is a question that always forces you to slow down. And that moment of slowing down is exactly where the difference begins to form. Many people think wealthy people have iron discipline. In reality, most of them simply have a good framework of questions, a framework that filters out impulsive decisions before they become habits. When you ask the question, does this bring me closer to freedom or farther away? You no longer look at an item only by its appearance and price. You look at it through its long-term impact. Does it raise a standard of living that you'll have to maintain? Does it make you need to earn more money just to keep your current life the same? If the answer is yes, wealthy people are usually very cautious, not because they are stingy, but because they protect their ability to choose. They understand that every time you raise your standard of living, you are signing an invisible contract with the future. That contract says, I will need more money every month, whether I want to or not. Wealthy people don't sign those contracts unconsciously. They sign very slowly, and they sign very few. Not because they don't like comfort, but because they know comfort always comes with constraints. One small constraint may be fine, but many small constraints create a life with no flexibility. Wealthy people aren't obsessed with minimalism. They are obsessed with keeping the exit open. An exit from a job that no longer fits. An exit from a pace of life that exhausts them. An exit from choices they only made because they already built them. And that exit is purchased through decisions not to buy. Many people think freedom comes from big investments. But wealthy people know that freedom often begins with not spending small amounts unconsciously. An expensive meal won't make you poor. A beautiful item won't ruin your life. But a habit of spending without questioning will. Wealthy people don't ask, what will people think? They ask, if I buy this, how will my life be different 5 years from now? That question makes many items lose their appeal immediately. Not because they are ugly, but because their cost becomes too clear. That cost is not money. It is dependence. Dependence on current income. Dependence on the current pace of life. Dependence on having to keep doing what you are doing now. Wealthy people are very sensitive to this dependence. They don't want to be bound by the very things they own. And because of that, they spend money with a very different awareness. They don't fight pleasure. They simply choose pleasure that doesn't take away freedom. A trip that brings experience. A new skill that brings another way to earn money. A financial buffer that brings calm. Those things aren't always exciting right away, but they always expand choice. Wealthy people measure spending not by how it feels today, but by how light life feels tomorrow. If a decision makes tomorrow heavier, they consider it very carefully, not because they don't live fully, but because they don't want to live in a gold-plated cage. If you're listening to this and wondering whether you need to change your entire way of spending, the answer is no. You don't need to do everything differently right away. You just need to change the question from, can I afford it? To, is this bringing me closer to freedom or farther from it? That question won't make you rich immediately, but it makes it very hard to be poor in choices. And sometimes being rich in choices matters more than being rich in money. There is something very dangerous about overconsumption. Not because it makes you poor right away. If it were only money, you could earn it back. What's far more dangerous is that it takes away your choices without you even realizing it. Overconsumption rarely shows up as a big mistake. It doesn't come from one single impulsive decision. It comes from hundreds of small decisions that each seem perfectly reasonable. A little more comfort, a little more convenience, a little less tired. Each time you add a little, your life looks better on the surface. But behind that appearance, something very quiet is happening. Your standard of living is rising, and along with it, your tolerance is shrinking. When you get used to a higher standard of living, anything lower starts to feel like deprivation. Not because it truly is, but because you've shifted your baseline, and once that baseline has shifted, you can't go back without feeling pain. This is the first cost of overconsumption. You lose the ability to simplify. You no longer live easily with less, not because you can't, but because you no longer want to, and no longer wanting to is far more dangerous than not being able to. When you no longer want simplicity, your choices start to narrow. You can't easily change jobs. You can't accept a period of lower income. You can't pause to learn a new skill. Not because those things are wrong, but because your current life demands constant feeding. Overconsumption turns your life into a machine that needs money. And once life becomes a machine, you don't have much freedom left. You have to keep running, not because you're ambitious, but because you have no other choice. Many people mistake this state for success. They see a full life, a busy schedule, an image that looks fine, but inside, they know very well that they cannot slow down. Not because they don't want rest, but because resting would make everything collapse very quickly. This is the second invisible cost. You lose the right to fail. When your standard of living is high, you are not allowed to make mistakes. A wrong decision is no longer just a lesson, it becomes a threat. You can't try a new direction if it's uncertain. You can't accept small risks because the consequences may be too big. And so you choose safety. Not safety for growth, but safety to avoid collapse. The difference between those two states is very subtle, but the consequences are enormous. When you live only to avoid collapsing, you will never build a lighter life. Overconsumption also takes away something else that very few people notice: time to think. When you always have to earn money to maintain your current standard of living, you no longer have much space to reflect. You're always busy, always something to do, always bills to pay. And when you don't have time to think, you can't change. You only react. React to work, react to pressure, react to whatever is right in front of you. Overconsumption keeps you in that reactive mode. It doesn't give you the quiet space you need to ask big questions. Is this life right for me? Am I building anything? Do I have another choice? Those questions only appear when you have space. And space is the first thing overconsumption takes away. There is a painful paradox. Consumption is promoted as the path to personal freedom. You are encouraged to enjoy life. But overconsumption creates a life you cannot leave. You become stuck in your current pace, your current income, your current version of yourself. And with each passing year, leaving that life becomes harder. Not because you are weaker, but because you are carrying too much. Too many financial responsibilities, too many implicit commitments, too many things that must be maintained. The biggest invisible cost of overconsumption is that you don't realize you're paying it. There is no bill that says, this is the price of losing choice. No notification pops up. When you trade a year of future freedom for comfort today, everything happens very quietly. And because it's quiet, many people don't realize they are being locked in until they want to change, want to rest, want to shift direction, want to live differently. And only then do they see how narrow the door has become. Not because someone locked them in, but because they built a room that is too tight for themselves. If you're listening to this and something feels very familiar, I don't want you to panic. The purpose of this section is not to scare you away from spending. The purpose is to help you see the real cost. When you see the cost, you can choose. Consumption isn't bad. Unconscious overconsumption is the problem. You don't need to cut everything out. You just need to reopen space for choice. That space is created when you stop buying things that lock down your future. When you keep your standard of living slightly below your capacity. When you give yourself a small buffer. That buffer is not just money, it's the right to breathe, the right to slow down, the right to think differently, the right to try a new direction without panic. That is the thing overconsumption always takes first. And when you take it back, even just a little, you will feel something very strange. Life may not change much yet, but you feel lighter because you know you're not locked in anymore. Lighter because you can choose. And sometimes just knowing that you have a choice is already a form of freedom. I want you to pause here for a moment, not to listen more, not to nod along, just to look straight at this very familiar moment. The moment you're about to buy something, not because you urgently need it, but because you want to feel lighter right now, at that moment, I want you to ask yourself just one question. The thing you're about to buy, is it buying you more freedom or is it buying it away? You don't need to answer right away. Just let that question stay with you for a few seconds. If you feel restless, that's completely normal, because this question isn't aimed at the object. It's aimed at what you're trading away. There are things that make today more comfortable, but tomorrow heavier. And there are also moments when you buy nothing at all, but you buy a bit of breathing room for the future. That moment is very small. No one sees it. No one praises it. But those exact moments are where freedom begins to be bought. If you've stayed with me this far, I want you to take away one simple thing. Freedom doesn't come from one big decision. It doesn't appear when you make a lot of money. Freedom is bought little by little, through the times you don't buy what makes today easier, but tomorrow heavier. Through the times you keep your ability to choose, instead of trading it for immediate comfort. Possessions can make life more convenient, but only freedom makes life lighter. Light enough to slow down when needed. Light enough to change direction when required. Light enough to say no without panic. You don't need to live harshly. You don't need to reject all pleasure. You just need to place rewards correctly. Reward real progress. Reward finishing something you've built. Not reward yourself to cover prolonged exhaustion. If today you only change one small decision, don't underestimate it. One small decision, repeated long enough, becomes a different life. If this video makes you slow down before reaching for your wallet, then it has done its job. And if you want, leave a in the comments, not to tell me, but to remind yourself, I saw my choice. If conversations like this help you live more consciously, stay with us. Not to buy smarter, but to buy freedom little by little. Thank you for being here. We'll keep talking